Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the ITMODSpotlight podcast. With me is Brad Gullickson, Mouth Dork.
When Chuck Norris was born, he drove his mom home from the hospital.
And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. Chuck Norris's tears are the cure for cancer, but unfortunately, Chuck Norris doesn't cry. And welcome to the ITMODSpotlight podcast, ITMODSpotlight on Bruce Lee.
Yeah!
This episode, we are talking about Way of the Dragon. So this is Bruce Lee's follow-up film from Fist of Fury, also known as Chinese Connection, which it in turn was a follow-up to The Big Boss, a.k.a. Fist of Fury. Way of the Dragon is also known as Return of the Dragon as well. I think in some parts it was released after Enter the Dragon. That's
why they re-released it.
Yeah. After the success of Enter the Dragon. So, I've seen this film many times before. Brad, this is your first go-around with this film, and this is Bruce Lee's first directorial debut of a film. And so when we spoke about The Big Boss and also Fist of Fury, which both were directed by Lo Wei, specifically The Big Boss, we talked about how because of the direction of that film, there were some behind-the-scenes issues with the making of that film, leading to that awkward first 45 minutes of movie not featuring Bruce Lee as the lead, and then some of the choices of fight choreography being out of sync with what Bruce Lee would favor on screen, and then shifting over to the Chinese Connection, aka Fist of Fury. How even though we had the same director, there was a step up, an improvement in, at the very least, the look of the film.
I mean, Fist of Fury, that's one of my new favorite movies. I loved that film.
Yeah.
I said on the last episode that Fist of Fury was everything I wanted to get out of this ITMODSpotlight adventure that we're doing. So it's certainly a tough act to follow. But it is exciting to think going into Way of the Dragon, this is Bruce Lee's directorial debut. This is his vision.
Right.
So I was highly anticipating more of that Bruce Lee-ness from Way of the Dragon.
Okay. And so the story of Way of the Dragon, it's about Bruce Lee is called to Rome, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
For assistance. He has a family restaurant that is there. Some relatives have a restaurant that's there, and they are being
extorted.
They're being extorted, right? And so basically, they call over Bruce Lee for protection. Mm-hmm. And that's really like the long and short of it.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a classic action film plot. I've seen that in several low rent movies in the past. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting before we get to the plot is the credits of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And the way, it says, Bruce Lee in Way of the Dragon. Then there's a credit for Nora Meow. And then Chuck Norris, 7 times U.S. and World Karate Champion. Mm-hmm. And then Italian Beauty, Melissa Longo. Mm-hmm. Robert Wall, World Professional Karate Champion 1970. Mm-hmm. Wang Ing Sik, Hapkido 7th Dan. I don't know what that means. And then, it has credits for, action instructors. And then Bruce Lee is listed there along with Unicorn Chan. Mm-hmm. And so, from the start of Way of the Dragon, you get the idea that Bruce Lee wants not only to give credit where credit's due, but he is bringing in true talent.
Yes.
He can't just fight anybody. He's got to fight 7 times U.S. and world karate champion Chuck Norris.
Right. And so, yes, that is in the opening credit sequence. So we see after the opening credit sequence, we open up on Bruce Lee, close up of Bruce Lee, and we pull back to reveal that he is at the airport and he's just landed in Rome. And
he's really hungry.
He's really hungry. And so a large part, at least for the earlier part of the film, deals with the fish out of water foreigner in a foreign land aspect.
It's very comedic. It took me off guard.
Yeah, and so I think that this was a piece of from Bruce's experience, because Bruce was well traveled. Like at this point, he had been over to San Francisco and things like that, and so Bruce understood and potentially had similar experiences, especially at that particular time. Going to somewhere like Rome and being a Chinaman and being a foreigner and having people blatantly look at you like you're from outer space. Because truth be told, you can go some places now down south in the States and get looked at in a certain way if you're from a different area.
Sure. And I think it's born out of an attempt to gain a larger audience, right?
Right.
So he leaves Hong Kong for Rome because that's where international dollars are. He's hoping to widen his audience,
Yes.
and it does happen. It happens, but at the same time, that then creates this, a stranger in a strange land scenario where he minds some comedy, and it's just not what you're anticipating coming off of Fist of Legend, a
Right.
very serious, dour experience.
Yes.
That close up of Bruce Lee at the airport, it pulls back. He's waiting to get out of there, to leave customs, and there's that one white lady, and she's like staring intently at him, and his stomach is growling,
Right.
and he's trying to like hide the rumbles in his belly from her.
Yeah.
And she's just like giving him the eye
Yeah.
until her husband shows up and pulls her away.
Right.
And wherever he goes, you can sense his unease and he hasn't even left the airport yet.
Right.
He's starving, and he finds a airport restaurant,
Yeah.
and he can't read the menu.
Right.
So he basically orders one of everything. And what's weird about this restaurant is like the menu he was given was like a Campbell's soup menu.
Yeah, it's just all soup on that one side, I
Yes.
guess.
So he ordered like 7 bowls of soup, and he's just going from one bowl of soup to the next. Sip, 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 slurp, slurp, slurp.
Yeah.
And it's just a really goofy, weird scene.
Yeah, and the waitress, she knows that he doesn't understand what's on there, so she knows he's just ordering whatever, and he doesn't know what he's getting. So she's standing there to watch to see if he's going to say, "All right, I don't know what any of this is. I can't eat it." But like he eats it, I guess. I don't know if it's to save face or just to show respect or whatever. He eats all the soup, which leads to some GI intestinal issues that are turn out to be like a running gag throughout the film. But that awkward scene and just the comedic tone that Bruce Lee decides to take for Way of the Dragon. I remember initially being off-put by, because like you just mentioned, we come off of Fist of Fury where like that ends in a hail of gunfire. Both that and The Big Boss feature him as a tragic character. Like there aren't really any comedic beats as pertaining to Bruce Lee's characters in either of those films, except maybe when he was drunk in The Big Boss. But even then, there was still some uncomfortableness with that scene. But with Way of the Dragon, I think, even though it catches people off guard, I like it, number one, in that Bruce Lee, as a director, took that chance to say, all right, well, I'm known as the guy who kicks ass. I'm known as the stoic hero of China. But I'm going to subvert expectations, and I'm going to come with a different tone, firstly. Secondly, as briefly glimpsed at in Fist of Fury, that scene we talked about when he puts on the goofy glasses in the disguise of the telephone repairman, we get to see some of Bruce Lee's comedic performance there. The Way of the Dragon allows Bruce to expand on that range and show him be a more of a comedic performer.
I don't think he's as successful as that telephone operator in Fist of Fury.
Right.
the first 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. It
or
feels
so.
like a long time. It's Way of the Dragon is a comedy,
Right.
but and you know the difficulty with that type of thing is every time I start one of these movies up with The Big Boss, Fist of Legend, and now Way of the Dragon, it takes me a while to find the right language track I want to listen to.
Right.
So, you're like, okay, well, am I going to do Mandarin? Because that's how it was originally released, is in Mandarin, but Bruce Lee speaks Cantonese. So do I want the Cantonese track, even though it's not his voice, at least his lips will match the language?
Right.
Do I want to just go full-on English dub?
Right.
And honestly, with Way of the Dragon, there's a portion where I elected to do English dub because the English dub fit the weird-ass tone of this movie.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, if I gotta recommend that as well. If you're gonna watch Way of the Dragon, and I'm always an advocate for watching subbed over dubbed, but there's a charm in watching Way of the Dragon with the dub version, just like there's a charm in watching like old kung fu theater dubbed in English. So you get that. Those.
I would not recommend it for Fist of Fury or The Big Boss.
No, not at all.
But because of the goofiness of the first 20 minutes, it kind of works. However, I did switch back to Mandarin when the action plot came back.
Right.
Because the English dub does not work in a fight scene.
No. But so Bruce Lee goes to this restaurant. First, he meets. I don't know if she's
a cousin or something.
I don't know. I don't know if she's related to him. She's bad, man. And I don't mean bad in a bad way. I mean bad in a good way. She's really beautiful. So she meets him, and she's not at all smitten with Bruce Lee when she first meets him. She takes him on a tour of Rome, and then they eventually make their way to the restaurant where you meet the staff of the restaurant, which is the usual cast of characters that we've seen. A lot of them in Fist of Fury and also The Big Boss. And so they're the guys that they're working there. So when Bruce Lee meets them, if I'm not mistaken, they're in the midst of training in karate, right? And so this is where we get the glimpse of the one of Bruce Lee's. It's one of the things he would talk about many times in his teachings, in his interviews, and in his books about the different martial arts style. So there's a discussion and a debate about the validity of Chinese boxing, Chinese kung fu, Chinese boxing versus another martial arts style, say like karate. And so Bruce Lee, like many of his other films, uses those films as a vehicle to show the benefits, the beauty, and the technique of Chinese martial arts and Chinese boxing. And so we'll have some fight scenes where Bruce Lee is purposely putting on the display for the combatant, his opponent, but also the audience, to show you like Chinese form, Chinese the efficiency of the martial arts style. And so like I really dug that.
What's interesting though, when he is introduced to the wait staff and they're all practicing their styles, they encourage him to join in,
right?
And he's going to.
Yeah.
But then the chef shows up, his like uncle.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, no, stop! Just before it's about to happen, because
Yeah.
you're like, oh man, I've been with this movie for 25 minutes. Now we're gonna get some Bruce Lee. And when Bruce Lee goes to his apartment for the first time, he does some practice in the mirror.
Yeah.
And you get to see Bruce Lee, represent.
Yeah.
So I was really excited to see him take on this wait staff, and then it's cut short. You're like, oh no.
Yeah.
But there's another scene that happens actually before that sparring match that's really awkward and weird. And that's when he's, getting the tour of Italy.
The tourist lady?
Yeah. He's getting a tour of Italy, and, his cousin, friend, whoever, is telling him, look, you need to smile.
Yeah.
Because when you smile, you're friendly, and people like friendly people.
Right.
So he starts smiling at everybody, and he starts smiling at this Italian beauty.
Yeah.
And she smiles back.
Yeah.
And then gets picked up by her.
Yeah.
And she takes Bruce Lee back to her place.
Yeah.
and undresses, and he freaks out. He's like, boobs, Italian boobs. I can't deal with this. And he flees.
I watching it, I totally forgot, because I haven't seen this movie in a while. So I totally forgotten about that scene. And watching it this time, I was like, wait, what the fuck is going on? Like, is this a extended edition? I don't even remember this.
We talked about this on the last episode, but I never think that these are like exploitation R-rated movies.
Yeah.
And then this weird nude scene happens.
Out of nowhere,
and you're like, oh, 70s.
Yeah.
Rad.
Yep. And so, I watching it this time, he is so awkward in that scene and out of place. But that's the point of that scene. Like, wait, what the fuck is going on?
And I guess to your point, seeing the different sides of Bruce Lee, it really does play with expectation. And how, like, I don't want Bruce Lee behaving this way. I want him to know what to do with a pair of tits.
In all situations, yeah.
But seeing him just, like, not be able to be this fish out of water, again, coming off of Fist of Fury, this man of total confidence in his physique anyway, and seeing this character, it's just so different. And the idea that it's the character that he is directing himself, it's just very strange.
Yeah. But I think when you take away Big Boss and Fist of Fury, when you just look at it really is. But when you just look at Way of the Dragon and the way that they set that up, unlike Big Boss, he is the lead in the film from the get-go. But similar to Big Boss, you don't see Bruce Lee unleash his full potential until later on in the film. But the cool thing is, and the interesting thing is, I think the very first thing you see Bruce Lee is in that airport in an awkward situation that he is not in control or the master of. That scene with the pickup with the Italian woman, he is not the head cheese in the room at that point. When he is with that lady he's staying with, because I don't think that's his cousin.
I don't know what she is.
He is also inept at socially communicating with her as well. So you see an awkward Bruce Lee, but the moment it's time for him to spar or fight, you see him go, oh, now this I can do. I'm the man at. Watch this.
But we're not there yet.
No.
Because after his uncle breaks up says, whoa, you can't fight. No, we don't have time for this.
Right.
He gets the soup shits again. They're still there. And he's got to go to the toilet. So he goes to the toilet in the restaurant. And I guess the toilet's not like how it is in Hong Kong.
No.
So he does this weird, and we get to watch him do this weird squat over the toilet.
Yeah.
And a white guy enters and catches him squatting in an awkward manner.
Yeah.
And then that's when the effed up village people show up.
Yeah.
The mafia.
Yeah.
And there's a guy who looks like, Jesus Christ, and there's a guy who's dressed up like a pimp.
Yeah.
Where's the construction worker and the Native American?
Yeah.
And so they show up, and it's ridiculous. It's just so wonderfully 70s. And you're just like, yes, goofy bad dudes with white boy fros.
Yeah.
I can't wait for Bruce Lee to take these guys on.
Yeah. And so is that when they get taken out of the back and said, all right, well, because the one guy says, I want some Chinese spare ribs.
Yeah, it's before that, because also this is where Mr. He is introduced.
Yes.
That's one fashionable guy.
But he is playing his favorite type of role, like the lackey, like shifty, smarmy guy who's always siding with the wrong people.
But there's also he's like a gay panic villain.
Yeah.
He's like the evil effeminate guy, which is a little weird.
Yeah.
And something you don't see anymore.
Right.
But I mean, that performance is a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Also awkward, but it is a fun performance. And definitely roots it in its time period.
Yeah.
And that's when, they threaten him, but that's when they go to that one table, and there's the black guy, and he says, I want those Chinese spare ribs.
He goes, what's that? And he punches him in his damn ribs. And then that's when they go out back. And then this is when you get the first display of Bruce Lee's martial arts prowess. And they say, and he says, I'll show you Chinese boxing.
Yeah. And he's like, "This is the opponent's like, this is a Chinese boxer," and he yawns.
Yeah.
Like he's so disrespectful towards Bruce Lee. And when he yawns, you're like, "Oh man, this guy's gonna get his ass handed to him."
Yeah. And so when you look at Fist of Fury and you look at the Big Boss, and as amazing as those fight scenes were in Fist of Fury, and we have that one epic, potentially one top 5, top 3, maybe top number 1 fight sequence of all time in that dojo. You have some very compelling and strong action performance from Bruce Lee. But in this scene, some of my favorite scenes with Bruce Lee, as far as him showing his skill and his form, are the scenes in this alley. Because number one, I mean, yeah, he's showing off for the audience, but he's showing off for those characters again to show the benefit and the power and the beauty of Chinese boxing. So he's making sure it's a showy type performance, but he's not adding flourish. He's just doing his different like kata for it. And so you get to see just his pose and his balance, his just how well his form is in it, and his speed and his crisp and his rigidity in it. And then like the guys start throwing fists and he just starts fucking those guys up. And it's a really funny and fun fight scene.
This is the other interesting thing about Way of the Dragon that separates it from Fist of Fury and The Big Boss. Both of those movies, I don't know about Big Boss, but Fist of Fury, certainly they have guns in them, right?
Yeah.
Fist of Fury ends in a climactic shootout. But in Way of the Dragon, the mobsters all have guns. And it becomes a plot element where, after the Chinese spare ribs action scene, that scene is cut to a halt because a guy pulls a gun on him. And Bruce Lee makes a comment to one of the waitstaff, "It's really easy to buy a gun here, isn't it?" And that's when he starts fashioning darts
yeah.
to combat the firearms. And so I thought that was really interesting to watch, how the threat of a firearm changes the strategy of Bruce Lee.
And so, that was also, that was Bruce Lee's commentary on the times, and how outside of his country he goes to this other foreign country, and how firearms are just readily available to anyone on the street. And so, having trained and sparred and learned and been taught in China and Hong Kong for the type of altercations you would have on the streets of Hong Kong and on the rooftops and in the slums, again, this is the strategy you would use. But you go somewhere else, there are different types of threats, so you adapt to different types of threats. And that was Bruce Lee's, that was his philosophy about fighting in general. That's why he's never said one martial art was better than the other. He would learn all of them. That way he could not be surprised when he would go somewhere and they're using a different tactic. He'd be able to adapt to it because he's all encompassing. So if he was not more open to the idea that your opponent is going to come at you with different attacks, different weapons or whatever, then he wouldn't have the knowledge to know, well, all right, well, I'm not going to use a firearm, but I can fashion some weaponry that will allow me to attack from a distance really quickly. And so, again, in those little things like that, those little details, Bruce Lee is infusing his philosophies that you would read and find in his books and things like that.
And at this point, we're also starting to see that, like Fist of Fury and The Big Boss, it works like a video game where there is a pyramid of villainy. And at the top, you have the head mobster guy. He's like the mustache man of the last film.
Yes.
And glasses before that. And, Mr. He works for him. And this Italian mob guy loves outsourcing talent.
Yeah.
And that's when you don't meet Chuck Norris, but you get word that he is sending for help because his crew can't handle Bruce Lee.
Right. They're going to send for Colt.
Right. Colt, yes. You have another action scene where it's, again, I believe it's in the alleyways. The nunchuck
double
comes
nunchucks.
out. Yeah. Double nunchucks.
So how do you What'd you think
That
about
was
that scene?
rad. That was awesome.
Yeah.
It's the nunchucks in Fist of Legend. I commented on how annoying, not Fist of Legend, Fist of Fury, how annoying it looks to combat because it's just like toes, fingers, fingers.
Yeah.
The double nunchucks, he's not messing around.
No.
I mean, he slaughters those guys.
Yeah.
And that guy who yawned at the previous fight, when those double nunchucks come out, I think he even says, like, Mamma Mia!
Yeah,
it's like straight up Mario Brothers territory here.
Yeah.
And, the double nunchucks, skull crack.
Yeah.
Just brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal instrument.
And I like that in each of his films with if you start at the big boss and then you go fight scene number 1, fight scene number 2, the final fight scene, go next to Fist of Fury, fight scene number 1, fight scene number 2, fight scene number 3. Like Bruce Lee is never repeating himself. If you go back and look, if you just do a highlight reel of all of his fight scenes and put one YouTube clip together with all of them, like he's never really repeating himself. And I really like that. So the evolution of the nunchuck scene from Fist of Fury, we're going to have 2 nunchucks, and then we're going to show a different style of fighting with those. And so I really appreciate it and enjoyed that.
And then there's the scene with the rifleman, right? There's a sniper who goes on the hunt for them, and
That's right.
and Bruce Lee chases after him. He's got his darts, and he throws that dart right in his ass.
Yeah.
I liked that sequence quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because just what you were saying, just after you had the double nunchuck scene, well, again, we have to address this fact that these guys, the mob, they're armed, and they're also cowardly about it.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to hang out on a rooftop and pick you off.
Yeah. And so at this point, does that then lead to when Bruce Lee makes his way to the office of the bad guy?
Yeah.
And they have that badass fight. I had totally forgotten about that fight scene. There's motherfuckers flying left and right everywhere. But the cool part about that is the people that come with him are the waitstaff guys. They're actually like throwing down in there, and like that was a really fun fight sequence. And then he jumps up and kicks that light in the ceiling by the door.
Yeah, that's a great kick.
Yeah, and so that guy's like super pissed off. So like all of his help's getting beat up. The rifleman guy, the sniper guy is getting beat up, and he's still waiting on Chuck Norris's cult to come. But Chuck Norris's cult arrives.
He shows up, and when Chuck Norris steps off that plane,
Yeah.
One, I mean, I knew it was like, no mustache Chuck, which is a weird Chuck for me.
Yeah.
I grew up with mustache Chuck, Firewalker Chuck.
Yeah.
But he's got the sideburns, and he's got that weird, like, extended bowl cut haircut that he's got. And he's wearing this rainbow shirt and this, gold Dr. McCoy medallion.
Super 70s out.
Super 70s. But when he steps off that plane, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
7 times U.S. World Karate Champion Chuck Norris. I am so happy you're in this movie now.
Yeah.
And, there's question about, like, the fact that, well, hold on. This is you're a white guy. How can you do karate better than the Japanese?
Yeah.
Chuck Norris shows him.
Yeah. And I like that Bruce Lee showcased that. Like, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, what your background is. And that would speak to his philosophy of teaching people outside of China Chinese Kung Fu. And so I like that if you're not looking for it, it's just whatever. But if you're paying attention to Bruce Lee and after the film, his philosophies and his teachings and things like that, that's apparent. That's obvious. It's right there. And so I really like that he showcased that. You don't look at, you go beyond the person, the color, the ethnicity. You look at the person and their ability and who they are. And so I really appreciate that about the film.
And what I thought was interesting is the first confrontation between Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee is not a fight, but Chuck Norris has his own student.
Yeah.
And he sends his student against Bruce Lee. And that fight is insane.
Yeah.
And it climaxes with Bruce punching him straight in the balls. It's like Johnny Cage, finish him.
Yeah.
And he drops that dude, and Chuck gets to watch his student crumble.
Yeah. Before we go, because after this is the chase sequence that leads to the Coliseum.
Right.
But before we go to this, way back when the first film, when we talked about Big Boss, we spoke about that moment where at the end where Bruce Lee gets his shirt ripped and then he just pulls the rest of it off, and you were like, holy shit, this dude's just freaking specimen. And I remarked that, well, yeah, that's his first film, but he would just later like just continue to just define his physical attributes, his body. So there's a scene in Where the Dragon when he's in his when he's flexing in his apartment.
I mean, it's like pumping iron. I mean, I'm ready for him to, go to Mr. Universe against Ferrigno and Schwarzenegger.
Tell me that was not impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy impressive. It's disgusting, is what it is.
It is amazing. His physical, he was at peak physical condition, and it was just. But again, that also, yes, that was him like flexing and kind of showing off. But when you look at his books and his philosophy, not even his philosophy, but his teachings. He believed that in order to be the best as far as the martial art was, you have to make sure that you're in peak physical condition to be able to even do these things at your best potential. Right. And so he was always striving to, not become big, muscular Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was always, trying to condition his body to be the less resistance when I'm punching my fist through the air. I just wanted to be lean, but with enough muscle to have impact when that punch lands. And he always strived to make sure that his body was in the perfect physical condition to be able to do and perform his martial arts. And like that one scene, like every time I see that clip, it's just nuts. Like how he puts his hand on his waist and he flexes outward and makes I can't remember this.
It's inhuman.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. So then we get a little bit more of that later on, because now Bruce Lee is meeting Chuck Norris in the Coliseum.
And this is the last film to allow, actually not allow, this is the last film in which a camera crew shot inside the Coliseum.
Right.
They did not allow it. They just did it.
Right. Yeah. So what were your thoughts on them two combatants having that be the place for the final showdown?
I mean, for this movie, it has to be that show, the place. It has to be the Coliseum. It's the ultimate gladiatorial combat, right? Yeah. Now, the way they shoot it, they have some wide shots where you see Bruce Lee walking the floor of the ruins, and then there's a snap zoom of Chuck Norris, all in white. And that's the other interesting thing. Now Chuck Norris is wearing the white, the symbol of death, which is the outfit that Bruce Lee wore in Big Boss and Fist of Fury. And so they're all long shots, so you could see how they could sneak a few cameras in and make it happen, right? But when it's finally time to go into the actual fight, they're not like fighting in the pit of the proper Coliseum.
Right. They're on a soundstage.
They're on a soundstage.
Right.
But symbolically, it's got to be there. And, at the start of the film, when his not cousin, not relative, is taking him around Rome and going by the places. They pass like the Colosseum like 3 or 4 times. Yeah. And it's like the Chekhov's gun thing. You can't just introduce the Colosseum as just a monument. You got to take advantage of it. Yeah. So what I really like in the Colosseum is Chuck Norris is taunting Bruce Lee before you see him all in white. He's, in the shadows, screaming out, "You're at death's door. Prepare to meet your end, and this is it for you. There's no further." Yeah. And honestly, there was no reason to think that at this point in the story, other than, as a modern audience, I know Chuck Norris is also one bad dude. And he's a formidable guy. But Chuck Norris, he had his student got his ass kicked. Bruce Lee's kicked a whole bunch of ass up until this point. Yeah. So I feel like you're going to go down pretty quickly, Chuck Norris. Yeah. So maybe you should ease up on the taunting. Yeah. But and when they finally confront each other, within like in dueling position, there's a shot. And it's kind of a cowboy shot, a gunslinger shot. The camera is under Chuck Norris's legs, pointed out, and shooting Bruce Lee. And this is a duel. Yeah. And I dug the anticipation of this moment. I really appreciated how they shot it. how they the setting of it, and the disrobing that happens there too. You know, he takes off the black belt, he takes off the robe,
But he didn't take off his sweater.
no, if he's gonna kick Bruce Lee's ass, he's gonna do it with his hairy chest rocking.
And hairy back and hairy shoulders.
Yeah.
Fuck Chuck Norris.
No way! No way an actor would allow his body to be shot that way now. He would be waxed
Hell yeah.
to his bone. But no, Chuck Norris is confident because he knows he can kick your ass, sweater and all.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I appreciated about this fight, if you look at all the confrontations leading in Bruce Lee's other films, none of them played out like this one. There was a build up to it. There was, yes, he has his standoffs. He has his face off. He'll face down with someone, but then he'll just get right into it. But this one, it felt like there was something more than that. It was ceremonial almost.
Yeah, so they disrobe, right? But then they do like stretching exercises, you know, and it's not like stretch my elbow, crack my knuckles. It's like it's part of the ceremony, and that's where you also get this kitten that's like watching the entire fight.
Yeah.
And my first introduction to this fight was through GIF form, right? And the GIF is Bruce Lee staring, Chuck Norris staring, kittens,
cat. Kitten.
And so I thought that GIF, they had inserted that cat as a joke. No, that's part of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they play on that a lot. You know, it very much is like the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where you have the good, the bad, the ugly, you know, close up on eyes. But instead of the ugly, you have this kitten. And they keep cutting to that kitten.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah. And speaking of the good, the bad, the ugly, the score, the Ennio Morricone score is in the film.
Yep.
In the film. Yeah.
Yep.
So I was wondering if you were going to peep that and thought maybe you could appreciate that.
Absolutely. And well, I mean, it just adds to the build that this is, like I said, a duel.
So they square up, and then they begin to fight. And so talk about
the cat actually starts the fight.
Yes.
So the cat screams, and then boom, fists.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And so talk about this fight compared to the one against Dojo, or the rough and tumble with the Russian dude in the courtyard.
Well, I mean, first off, you know, it's set up. There is a lot of ceremony to it. But I also feel like because Bruce Lee, the director, also respects Chuck Norris, the champion, he allows Chuck Norris's character to, you know, get the better of Bruce in the fight more often. The fight is longer; it's extended compared to any of the other previous fights we've seen so far. When Bruce Lee knocks Chuck Norris down, I love that Chuck Norris smiles. It's kind of like Wonder Woman in Batman v Superman, right?
Yeah.
You know, where she's like, "Oh, Doomsday, here's an opponent that's my equal," or the Beast in Kung Fu Hustle, which we also talk about this week.
That's right.
As part of ITMOD month. You know, the Beast has always just wanted to meet a worthy opponent to either kill him or be killed by him. And that's the impression you get between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
And honestly, whatever my misgivings were about this film up to this point, like trying to navigate the tone of the movie, it's all worth it for this moment.
Yep.
It is certainly a scene equal to some of the action sequences in Fist of Fury and The Big Boss.
Yeah. I love Bruce Lee. I do not love Way of the Dragon, but I love this fight. Like, I would sit through this movie to watch this fight.
Well, and Chuck is just so crazy fast. I mean, he does feel like a physical equal in technique, where I don't think any of his opponents have ever been given the time or opportunity to display that in previous films.
No. And one thing I really like, and I talk about this when I reference this fight scene all the time, is that compared to the fight scene in the kitchen of The Raid 2, you have two actual skilled combatants, but it's not over choreographed to that extent of some modern films, and it's not given like ultra flashy moves. When they're throwing punches, Chuck Norris is actually using karate, and Bruce Lee is countering with Chinese boxing and kung fu.
The rumor is that it's all actual physical contact. It looks like a real fight.
Yeah, and so that is how. So Bruce Lee is saying, if I were fighting an opponent using karate, this is what it would look like for the most part. Again, granted, Bruce Lee's his philosophy is never to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 finishing move. Bam! It's my first punch should be the punch. My aim is to be the one that drops you. But for dramatic effect, if he were going to go back and forth, if he were to be with an opponent that would necessitate a back and forth long enough, this is what it would look like. And that's one of the reasons why I love and respect this fight scene so much, because it's, in that regard, it's real.
And one of the great elements of this fight scene is where you get to see his mimicry of Muhammad Ali's dance move.
I was waiting to see if you
know.
Oh, man.
But what I like is he takes on Muhammad Ali's, I don't know, what do you call it? That shuffle dance that he does, where you don't know where his kick's going to come from. You don't know where he's going to strike from because he's constantly moving. What I love is he lands a punch on Chuck Norris. He takes him out. Because of that weird dance, Chuck Norris is like, "Oh, I got what you're doing," and then Chuck Norris attempts to mimic Bruce Lee's mimicry of Muhammad Ali. It's awesome.
Yeah, and so again, that mimicry of Muhammad Ali, I'm glad you brought that up. For people who don't know, like Chuck Norris was a huge fan of Muhammad Ali, and he was a huge proponent of the rigid stance of karate versus kung fu or the boxing. So when you're fighting a boxer, if you're moving around constantly like that, like you just mentioned, you can't tell where a kick is gonna come from or where an attack is gonna come from. You can shift your body position. You can shift, so you can shift your hand, whether you're a southpaw or a right hand. You can easily shift between the two, and you can also throw your opponent off with because a good fighter will watch your waist also to see where kicks are coming from. And Bruce Lee understood that. Well, if I apply this that Muhammad Ali does to my kung fu, then I can throw my opponent off, and he will be less likely to. I will be less likely to telegraph my attacks. So that's something that he adopted. And my favorite thing is when he starts to do that in Way of the Dragon, they slow that down to like slow motion. So for me, my takeaway is when you look at that, you see how light Bruce Lee is on his feet and how graceful he is. It's like he's barely touching the ground. He's like on his tippy toes when he's doing that dance around Chuck Norris in that moment. If you go back and watch it, like just look, he's like freaking Peter Pan. He's barely touching that ground. He was so light on his feet, and that was a benefit of him being so lean, and that lent itself to him being so fast. Also, but him being light on his feet. And I love that shot where he moves in slow motion as he's doing that dance around Chuck Norris. But like you said, he gets that shot in that Chuck tries to adopt it, but then because Bruce Lee's practiced this, like he's the better at it, and then he ends up getting the better of Bruce Lee. Chuck Norris. Yeah,
Lee like breaks his arm and then he breaks his leg, and Chuck Norris is hobbling around. He falls down. He tries to get up. He falls down, stumbles back. He attempts to kick him with like a broken leg. Yeah. Falls back down, and then Chuck is murdered.
He checks out. Yeah, but you have that one moment where it's the camera's on Bruce, then it's on Chuck. It's the cat, and you hear that boom, 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 boom. Bruce, Chuck, kitten, Bruce, Chuck, kitten, Bruce, and then like he makes his final attack, and then Bruce Lee gets his ass in a headlock and snaps his neck. But instead of breaking his neck and then continually punching him like at the end of the other movie and walking off, what does he do?
Well, he goes and he finds his shirt, his robe that he had just taken off, and he drapes it over him. He pays respect because this was a true opponent.
What did you think about that?
I mean, I again, it was more about Bruce Lee, the director, and wanting to show that this was a real. This is a bout. This is a real opponent, not to be taken lightly. Yeah. And just because I kicked his ass means I should not respect him, and you should also respect him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty cool and gracious and generous of
I think this fight, I don't know if I'm going to go back and watch Way of the Dragon all the time, the way that I would Fist of Fury.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll rewatch this fight a bunch of times.
Yep, that's me. I'll just fast forward to that part almost all the time. Yeah. That's the beauty of like YouTube. It's just there. You can just watch the Bruce Lee versus Chuck Norris fight. So, but before the film ends, we wrap up some story threads. We have that betrayal of the uncle. Like, what'd you think about that? Were you caught off guard by that shit? That's out of nowhere?
Yes, I was so caught off there, and I was going to ask you, was that telegraphed at all? Like, did that come up before this scene?
No.
Suddenly the uncle is the bad guy?
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah, that's Bruce Lee being a first-time director and being really, really good at fighting, but not necessarily good at story and wrapping up.
I just think he wanted one last surprise.
Yeah.
And, he didn't want to just end the film, because, the way The Big Boss and Fist of Legend, they just end. And they end tragically. But then, if what was it, Way Low? If Way Low was directing Way of the Dragon, he would have broken Chuck's neck. Credits.
Yep. Or the cops would have came and shot Bruce Lee for killing Chuck Norris. Yeah. Interpol or FBI, CIA.
Exactly. That rifleman who got hit in the ass earlier. But Bruce Lee, I think he just wanted another twist at the end. And so, there's the betrayal of the uncle, and then the mob boss shows up again, and then the cops show up.
Yeah.
But it's it's straight up not a depressing ending. It's a normal hero's ending.
Again, and so while it's not my favorite, it's probably like my Game of Death is my least favorite Bruce Lee film. This is like close behind it. But again, like what I said before, when I was excited to have you watch this one and compare it to the first two, when you look at his filmography as a whole, Big Boss is not like Fist of Fury, although the endings are similarly tragic, but there's so many differences and things that differentiate Fist of Fury from Big Boss that you can appreciate. But then when you put Way of the Dragon next to Big Boss and also Fist of Fury, it also is a different film on its own. And then when you put Game of Death, for better or for worse, it's a totally other level of nuts. And then Enter the Dragon is just, chiseled out of stone and diamond, And I think for a short filmography, to have that eclectic of different types of feel for his short filmography, for me, is something that I really appreciate.
Honestly, I wasn't really looking forward to talking about this movie because when the film ended, I go, credits are rolling. I go to Letterboxd, I'm like 2.5 stars.
Right.
But talking about it with you as part of ITMOD Spotlight, I've really enjoyed this discussion.
Me too.
And it's made me probably appreciate the film a little bit more.
Yeah.
I certainly, just being able to relish in that final battle is a lot of fun.
That fight is so fucking amazing, man. I really love it.
And it's an odd movie. It's just a weird movie. So I don't know. I can't believe we're here. We're only 2 movies away.
Oh shit! So next up is Game of Death.
We're skipping Enter the Dragon, even though that falls chronologically.
Yeah.
We just want to save that. We want to stretch out our joy and our anticipation for that film with just another episode.
Yeah. So, but in knowing how nuts Game of Death is, I'm really looking forward to that conversation because it's been a while. Like I told you, like I would actively not watch that film as a kid because like I really genuinely felt some type of way about that. And
so I've only seen it the one time. Lisa and I watched it because she wanted to dress as Bruce Lee for Comic-Con last year, and I said, "Well, if you want to do that, we got to watch the film it's from."
Yeah.
So that's why we watched Game of Death for the first time. And it's awkward.
Yeah, and so
it's cool at times. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. It's weird. It's like it's kind of like. It's like The Big Boss. It's like Fist of Fury. Also, but Fist of Fury has a dope-ass fight scene in the beginning. But it's also like Way of the Dragon, and like the end of it, like if you just get to the end of it, it's worth sitting through the film. Whereas Fist of Fury, it's not even like it's a chore to do that. But I'm just saying, like, the end of Game of Death is worth sitting through the shit that is the rest of the film. Because when he finally, because he's not there for the duration of that film, and they have all these different crazy and insane methods of making you think it's Bruce Lee, when he actually comes and you sit with him and you know, okay, I'm going to be with him for the next 20 or 30 minutes because he's been absent for the earlier part of that film. For me, it feels good. It feels comforting. Like, there's my Bruce Lee. And I love that. And I almost appreciate the film being that way because of it. Because when I do get him, I cherish it so much.
I don't know. We're going to have to, well, one, we have to watch it
Watch
again.
it, yeah.
And, yeah, I'm really curious for that conversation.
Oh, man. Fucking Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, that fight scene, dude.
Yeah.
That's just fucking amazing. His scene with Don Inosanto, he's still alive today, still teaching Jeet Kune Do. But the nunchuck scene with the guy who's going nunchuck to nunchuck with Bruce Lee, like, oh man, that's an awesome scene. So yeah, I'm excited. But yeah, I'm not looking forward to all that crazy weird shit with the paper cutout Bruce Lee mask on the guy. Like, what the fuck?
Like, how, what?
That is just nuts. That's like you going in the room, taking that Michael Shannon cutout mask that we got from Lost Weekend, and then recreating a scene from fucking Take Shelter or goddamn.
We should do that.
Man of Steel. It's nuts.
We should do that as a promo video for Game of Death ITMODSpotlight.
Fuck, I got to get a Bruce Lee cutout mask. All right. But yeah, thanks again for facilitating this conversation, B. It's really, really fun.
I'm loving this series. I hope the listeners are.
I do too. Watch these films if you haven't seen it. Again, in some way, I got to get you that. I'm going to get you the that documentary, the journey.
It's on the Blu-ray.
A Warrior's Journey.
The Game of Death separate Blu-ray.
I think so. It's in the Warrior's Journey documentary. It's in the anniversary edition of Enter the Dragon.
Okay,
but I'll get it to you so you can watch it because it has that unedited ending with all the levels of that dojo that he goes up. So I want you to see that so we can discuss what could have been. But yeah, so that's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. The month of May, again, is ITMOD month at Alamo and Winchester. We just screened Kung Fu Hustle. Check out that review cast for that. Wife Dork Got Head coming up on the 14th, Mother's Day at 5 p.m. Tickets are on sale. Check it out. They're still available. Brad Gullickson, Mouth Dork has Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid coming up on the 21st at 5 p.m. Tickets are also on sale for that. And then Turtle Dork has Joe Carnahan's The Gray. If you want to see Liam Neeson punch wolves, don't come to this screening. But if you want to see Liam Neeson versus the Elements and Frank Grillo and all other manner of outdoor stuff in himself and inner turmoil, get your ticket for The Gray on the 28th of May. That rhymed. At 5 p.m. They're on sale. Yeah, thank you for listening. This is fun. Thanks, Brad. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Check us out on social media at ITMODcast. I'm not going to inundate you with the rest of our tags. You know where we are on social media. Thank you all for listening, and until next time.